All right, I'll record it. So today I want to talk about lexical turbulence, which is weird, and it's going to lead into attempts to measure story turbulence just in the world. The birth and death of words, right? What's the rate of that? This is sort of a big deal for language. It's going to be part of it. I know it's exciting, and so that's a fair. I'll try to keep that somewhat short, and then thought I'd just sort of mess around and try to make some figures here. Show you. We'll see how far we get. But it's for time series for some of the Pratchett books. And it's just some interesting things, just some exploratory stuff. So it's kind of how I behave, I suppose. So you might as well see the horror. I'll give you one question. I don't know if I've showed you this. These are fun things. There was one in Pucks. It was a constituent. It was the zip distribution for abundances of the elements in us, in humans. So what is it? I mean, we can work through this. This is a bit weird, right? But so unlabeled axes. This falls off the. You find this on the floor somewhere, and you're like. So. And what would be this axis? Okay, yeah. So that's right. This is time. A small hint for that was that there's no zero. Many jokes about that. So all right, we have this. It's plot that could be updated. I haven't. I think I'm using an older one I made. Something to do with people, but not population. But population does certainly.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe it's probably not that drastic.
It's pretty. It's kind of amazing. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's super weird. I mean, I was born in Australia. I think there were about 12 million people. There are twice as many now. It's just weird. It's really weird. And that's just, one country. So something humans have done. And there was, right, so increases here. And then a lot, so if this is, right, this is way back. Yeah. No. No, but it's really something to do with human, like a human. Just say things, sorry. People, so it's not the number of them, it's something else that gets produced by people. Well, the thing is that this, let me say it like this, I suppose. This is, what is it? Right. So let me maybe say more about this graph. Like this is a point where this is a measurement, and it held solid. This graph is not just like this is not just sort of interpolating. Like this is the value of this graph from here to here. This is the value of the graph from every millisecond from here. This is like what is it? 4,000 years. 4,000. So something that humans did remained, that measurement of that remained constant. And then, it was kind of...
Cattle size.
Cattle size?
Yeah, cattle size.
Well, it has to... This is very well measured, I suppose, I should say. Something we can measure now. True, you need to dig up a few, I guess. Yeah. But there's definitely going to be, so there's more of a punctuated, like you'd see, right? You should be able to see
we only just got back up to Roman cattle sizes.
True. Well, people used to be much taller too, I think. In that. Yeah. But you'd imagine there'd be a little, and we'd have more points of measurement, maybe. Like you don't have to remeasure anything. The thing that's holding this record is still the thing all the way through.
And there's like 150 of it.
It's not a number. So there are units of measurement. It's a basic physical unit of measurement. What are the basic ones? Well, yeah, with the physicists. What are they? What are the most basic things we measure about things? Weight. All right. So mass. This is dimensional analysis stuff. Remember that? Length. That's good. Also time. Right. We've got time here. So, mass, length, and time. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. This is a length scale. Yeah. So it's a measurement of something. I mean, length may be length, breadth, and height, right? It's a measurement of something.
Roads. Although you'd think we would have.
Would be right. It'd be okay.
But I don't know what happened.
There's an artifact that humans made that was this length and this length, or whatever you feel like. There's a so this is in meters, I think. Is that right? I'm not sure what it is. Actually, what is it? Well, there are gauge problems, right? Maybe there's that, and it's like, what's the best gauge? But that was argued about. You'd have to change your train as you went from one state to another or country to another. But you see, all that would be a little bit whatever. These things are still here. They still exist. They certainly existed all the way through. This one still existed all the way through. It just wasn't.
Pyramids.
Right. So it's, what about the pyramid?
Like tallest pyramid.
Right. So this is the tallest human-made structure in the world. So it's 4,000 years. There's some cathedrals. So there's some interesting things happen here because this one fell over. There's some things get burnt down or fall over. In this is Europe, so they don't. They made some very tall, pointy things.
You lose all your points then, because the Egyptian one is still there. So I think you secede all your points.
Yeah, that should be that seems wrong. That point there. It should be back to here. Yeah. Anyway, and then we kind of went Barney bananas up through here.
But we stopped doing pyramids, which was a mistake.
Totally.
Isn't like the Bass Pro Shops pyramid is like one of the largest pyramids in the world?
No, please no.
Which one?
There's like a Bass Pro Shops pyramid somewhere.
What?
Yeah.
What do you mean? It's like a shopping place? What?
Well, that's at least appropriate. Memphis? Okay, I can work with that.
Elvis should be involved, right?
Yeah. This is like
Oh my God.
Alright, but it is a pretty good pyramid. So
32 stories.
I have to take back my criticism a little bit.
It's the 10th tallest pyramid in the world.
It's pretty cool.
It's on the banks of not the Euphrates, but the Mississippi. Wow.
You go from Bass Pro Shops like ancient Greece really fast.
I haven't told you, but we have a paper from a few years ago. It's a student in Pox. It was so there's this idea that if you click on the first link, right, this is sort of this folklore sort of thing. If you click on the first link and then you keep doing that, eventually you get to philosophy. And we found that was true, actually. And it depends on the Wikipedia as it stands, but philosophy, it was a little ring. It went around like reality, measurement, existence, something, philosophy. So once you got into this little loop where it looped around. It's broken now, but. I think we try to measure that, and we did have another student who did that, like it's a search thing, like how do you navigate from broccoli to pyramid or whatever, right? Like the sort of a little game. Like how do you kind of, because, oh, okay,
It's like,
yeah.
It's like a real thing. It's like time. People with like
Yeah.
records and stuff.
Yeah, that was, I mean, that's what he and I can't remember a thing called, but that was the idea, and it was, it's like investigating the knowledge graph. So there is this, it is a big network of knowledge, but there's still sort of a tree thing. Like at the top is kind of like entity thinking and witness, reality, philosophy. What happens to reality on Wikipedia? So reality, you have to go to the right things. Ooh, imaginary is the first one now. It's an object, philosophical, there we go. So you have to ignore that one. Existence, you have to kind of go that. So now it's sort of, oh no, reality, that would be it. We have to be that one. And now we're back to it. Yeah. Now it's a loop again. Yeah. Just a minute, which I think is appropriately confusing. Anyway, I had this idea of making a whole bunch of these cryptography is kind of taken, right? Yeah. I didn't want you to go and get upset, but I think this is meters, which is bonkers, right?
What building is it?
This one will be in Dubai. I need to. I just came across this morning. I shouldn't have. Because it's just, there's a list, right? It's just a straight up list.
Oh, there's that one.
I think maybe it's still that one, actually. Yeah, it's 828, right? Which is, oh my God. There's a new building, the newest skyscraper in New York is like sort of pencil thin to look at. And I guess you have 360 views for $50 million. Or it's residential. Yeah, $50 million for the top one. But it's really thin, so you get a couple of feet movement when there's some wind. And, there's a similar building of where people have, they're suing because of nausea or whatever. And like, everyone is at fault here.
That would be so
it's just the worst. I can't even imagine it. I would rather live in a tree, like a tree that's going like, 10 feet across. You're like, fine.
And you can even see it. The windows would make it worse at that point.
If the next building, because it's like that. Anyway, what a bad idea. Yeah, but if trees, you're like, trees can do, this is what trees do. This is fine. I know that it's engineered to handle this a little bit, but,
What's megatall? Can you click on megatall? The Burj Khalifa has been classified as megatall.
I guess there are,
Okay, so they have a hard
only 4 of them. 600 meters, is that right? Well, they usually put like some little, who's he wants it at the top. Yeah, there's a lot of cheating. Oh, it's a mile, 1,600. Well, it's going to be 1,609. That would really suck to be. It's a metric mile. Okay.
That looks insane.
I mean, one day these are going to fall down, right? But just one day. I mean, this is a place very famously earthquake kind of adjacent, shall we say.
But they actually do a really good job.
They do.
Controlling for that. But there's only so much.
Yeah, they're still right. I still. Oh my God. All right. I'm an acrophobic. This is just terrifying to me. Oof. Okay. Wow. All right. That was a fun thing for you. All right. The birth and death of words. So there was this paper a few years ago. This is some time ago where we were quite taken by this. This is what it's going to be. It's Eitan Pratchett, who did the Google Books, is a bit of a mess work. And it was a very sort of data sciencey detective kind of work where we, had to spend a lot of time thinking about this. So this is a paper, Scientific Reports, Nature Scientific, and this is not to criticize. They did a reasonable thing, and we'll try to understand it, right? So they took Google Books, which again we've talked about as being problematic, but it should be able to tell you if words exist or not, right? Like that's sort of fair. So they have this claim. They looked at English and then English fiction separately, Spanish, and Hebrew, and they're trying to figure out the death rate and birth rate. So so we'll look at this. So this is a birth rate of new words into a language. So in principle, this is very sort of a simple thing to say. So, but how do you quantify that? How do you measure that? How do you there's some. What's the worst word for this? No. Okay. All right. So, all right. This is Hebrew gets a pump because of becomes Balfour Declaration. Like we'll write it into. We'll start publishing books and so on. So there's a rise there because you just sort of you're just taking books that you believe were from your little photo, your scanning machine and your poor individuals involved to have been published in that year. It's a bit weird because, of course, there are, Alice in Wonderland could appear in 1973 because it's a republication. So it's a measure of something because publishers think it's important. They want to hear it again. But for some reason, the white rabbit pops up. Okay, so what it looks like is, and here's 2000. This was done in 2012. The data set kind of went to 2000 that they were looking at, and it looks like there are no new words. Like, this is pretty bad. I mean, it's really decaying. This is a log thing. It's not zero, but it's like, of course, it's presented a little sneakily because it goes to, right? So it's not exactly a zero. And the death rate has gone up, right? We've been murdering words collectively as a team. So this is a thing, and it's like the slowdown of language. It sort of goes against the idea that we're innovating and taking off and building new buildings and. Right. So this is language is code, right? So. Right. And it does, mainly through, and I wanted, teenagers basically, right? Like coming up with new ways to say things. Sort of famously gendered, right? Sort of the engineer of culture and language. This is looking at a few examples, like so these are different references to the same thing, right? So recently coronavirus is what everyone said, and then it became COVID, capital letters, COVID-19. There was some confusion about what the 19 meant. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that, but people saying like, what about COVID-18 and 17? Like, why, what? Oh, it's so painful to think about. I think even Trump said that at some point. What? I'm sorry. Oh, God. Anyway, but we changed it. We went to capital letters COVID and that became the standard. So, you have to, if you're doing some big corpus thing, you have to sort of cleverly kind of sort that out. So they're kind of saying here, well, let's put them all together. There's sort of an average for all of them. That's sort of that term. X-rays aren't dying out. But what they do is a bit of a funny thing where they say, this is interesting actually, because this is something that went away from naming it after someone, which I totally approve, to the X-ray, because they didn't know what X, they didn't know what it was. Yeah.
It'd be like fascinating to like group this by like a subject, so say like you're looking at biology with like the refactoring rate of biology over time, because you can apply that to like different sciences and be like, oh yeah, like we're solving this problem. This is all like the jargon we use and the code we use, but like more refactoring rate is like refactoring rate.
Well, there's also just maybe it's but the realization that different fields have been working on these things, and then they've developed similar tools, and then they start using the same terms, and that's which one of them has to win if it's really a general thing that we need to be able to talk about across disciplines or across spaces, then stuff will fall away. Who was in charge of whether there's a hyphen? I mean, I don't know if you'll remember this, but way back, Lord Kelvin, right? I had a few quotes from him. All that remains is better and better measurement, which of course, so quantum and chaos would have been rather alarming for him. But he also X-rays will prove to be a hoax. I mean, it's pretty weird, right? Someone says, I just took a picture of the inside of your body, and you're like, sure. Also, ghosts exist, but I don't believe that. Like people are pretty into, and I just hypnotized my dog. I'd rather talk about that. So they do a sort of a funny thing. They say a word is alive if this is true. So this is a bit weird. So and I've tried to put it into some formulas. This between year 1 and year year 2, a word is alive if its frequency is above some cutoff frequency, which they define to be, so you can see the statistical significance thing, like sneaking in here, the old 5%, we love it. I don't know who was really responsible for that. Was it one of those maniacs like Pearson or whatever, our eugenicist statistician friends, which a little tricky, awful people, right? We love that. We love it. It's true. Now your pharmaceutical company can make money. Anyway, it's a little strange. It's the median value of the frequent, and this is the year scale. Take the median if it drops below 1 in 20. So this is then normalized by the word itself, right? So everywhere. So it's a word could be used like incredibly commonly and then sort of just drop down in usage, still being used, but because it went to 5% of its median, it's now declared dead.
It seems like kind of a lot to still be, it seems like you could still be in use, just
That's
alive.
Right. So it's totally weird, right? Because something could, we say telegram, there's the service, like the thing, but people say telegram as a thing, but not like they used to. So you wouldn't, there's no way you would call that dead. There's kind of claim, I remember this was some podcast I was listening to this, and it's sort of this observation that every technological thing that humans have ever made is sort of still being made in some way. There's someone making like plowshares that used to work for Roman, whatever, and someone's making some, I don't know if that's one of those things where there's a survivor bias problem. But people still keep making and using and playing around with old things for sure. And words fit into that category. Okay, so that's pretty weird. And that's where this all comes from.
It's not like the old books don't exist anymore.
Right. We really did move on from Old English, like there's a real change, from whatever 1,000, 1,200 years ago. And spelling, it took a while for spelling to be invented, right? Like we just did that, just wasn't a thing. There was spelling, but for it to be a collective, So, there are those kinds of issues as well. Just I don't know if that fits into refactoring, but it is even just spelling. Getting the spelling organized and on the same page, as it were. Okay, this is how we spell chicken. No Y's or whatever you crazy people in Yorkshire have. What's that? Can I say Severance? This is an offshoot.
I love that. I was gonna they remind me of Bell Labs.
It was filmed there.
Really?
That's what that's. I wasn't filmed there, but that's what that from the outside is Bell Labs.
They have to do some secretive stuff.
It's an Apple show. I don't know if that means it will ever be shown anywhere else.
It was good. It was really good.
Anyway, this is fantastic, but it's very weird and strange. The premise is that you go to work and you're severed. So as you go up the elevator, you just wake up in this other space and you have no idea of your outside thing. So your outside person, the outie, has decided to put you into a work environment where they will never have any memory of the work environment, and you as the inside one will have no knowledge of the outside one. That's the setup. Things happen. But the work they do, which is mysterious and important, that's what they keep saying. They don't really know there's sort of religious stuff involved. It's like 4 people sitting in a big room, it's all white. Ben Stiller directed a lot of this, which is interesting. It's truly a fantastically interesting. But macro data refinement. This is really great. When
It's got to be killing people.
you don't find out in the first. I got to tell you, that's not sort of a non-spoiler. It's it's not really clear what they're doing by the end of 9 episodes, and there's a second season at least. But MDR, macro data refinement. When I'm watching this, okay, that's what we do. Fair.
They really look for the stuff that look scary numbers.
Yes.
Spreadsheet. It's they hover their mouse over some animated sort of spreadsheet, and when numbers look scary, they drag into the boxes. That's their whole job.
I think they're also There are feelings. There are also some others, but you have to put them in special boxes. They're refining macro data. It's really unclear what's going on. I mean, it could be anything. It could be killing. It could be like changing people's brains. You know, it's terrible. I mean, I think it's fair to say it's probably terrible. If that's just a complete red herring or a furphy, as you might say in Australia, that would be disappointing because it's just fantastic. And it's a really old, like 80s kind of interface sort of thing, right? There's a little box at the bottom that you kind of drag it into and just you have to circle it with your cursor. But macro data refinement, it's great. A friend of mine, a close friend of mine in Europe, we were corresponding about it, and he's like, "It's what you do, basically, right?" And I said, "Yeah, we should change it to a PhD in macro data refinement." But you'd be happier, right? Yeah, it's pretty good. I know you argue about it. I like data sets, but macro data refinement, I'm very attracted to it. I was going to change the course page actually to MDR. Amazing. Okay, so this is there are plots on this. This is a big effort to kind of redo this, and this was in terms of macro data refinement. This is exactly this activity, right? So I spent a long time really focused on this one spring, and okay, so these are going to be birth and death rates for 1 grams using Peterson's method. This is A and C, right? These ones, but having different cutoffs in history. So what if we stopped at 1840 or 1860? Because that's really important, right? Right? Because it's going to depend on your history. Like it's going to turn on the median frequency, and then weird. And then we're going to do so. They had a thing where they took out any word that only appeared once, which was a bit, right? Or they removed words they removed the times that appeared in only 1 year in a time range. Blah blah blah. So this is using their method, and you can see that the end of history really matters. It makes it look like less words are being born dramatically. Because what's happening is there's sort of just, like maybe the start of a new word and they're not counting it because it's just appears once. If you take away that little thing, then that gets rid of all of these sorts of sudden downturns, and this looks kind of okay. It looks like it is slowing overall, but not plummeting. So there's a real end of history effect that you wouldn't want. These look the same. And again, this is a critique of their method. So if we just sort of include words that appear once, then that doesn't affect what the death rates look like. However, leaving that aside, right? This is what, if you're in 1860, you'd be like, oh, look at but if you're in 920, like you wouldn't think that the death rates for 1860 were that bad because they're here. Right. So if you're in 1860, you think the death rates in the most recent years are really high. If you're, in 1980, you actually think they're not that bad. Right. If you go back to here, and it looks like there wasn't much death of any of these words back here, just using the corpus. So that's really problematic. You would, ideally, right? There's this curve that we have here, and if you look at 1980, it fits on that curve. If you look at 900, it's on that curve, right? The end of history shouldn't matter. And so that's a problem for here. It's different for birth rates because actually the end of history doesn't, once we kind of clean up these pieces here, then we get they're all overlaying each other. So that's okay. That one seems okay. There's still an effect, that if you keep going, in time here, that this will lift up. There's still an end effect there. All right, exciting. So, but it's based on this, somewhat, it was I guess, pragmatic choice, but a bit of a weird one, this 5% thing. It was just strange. So this is really this is the word chap, and it matters that it's capital letters because that's Google Books is case dependent. And then this is a weird word, coryphaeus, which is to do with Greek choruses? No, coryphaeus. Let's look that up. And I wrote a little thing to find, there you go. Yeah, the leader of a chorus. That's what I had in my head. But it's the leader of a party or a school of thought. Okay, cult leader. This is if, again, we use their criterion for individual words, right? So this is this is like the parrot sketch from Monty Python, I guess is what I think about. But there's this word, again, all capital letters. If you look back in time and say, okay, its median was this, and has it dropped below 5%, it would look like it had here. So you'd think it was dead here, but now it's alive. It would be dead again here. Whoops. And then it would be alive again. And then, so I just did a thing to find the most ridiculous word. And it's this coryphaeus, right? So it looks like, I tried to find one that was oscillated the most. So it was like dead, alive, dead, alive, dead, alive, dead, alive, dead, alive. I mean, this is its frequency of usage. What this is based on these corpora are growing, right? There's a larger volume of words, and there's a cutoff of words have to appear 40 times, and so on across the whole thing. There's also just simply what's the lowest, if you have one word, a word appearing once, what's its lowest frequency? This is basically 1 divided by the total number of words. And because the total number of words is increasing, this is decreasing, but in a bit of a funny way. It's a log scale. So this is the floor of, right? This is 1 over n for each year. And so this coryphaeus is appearing once now and then, because it's hitting this piece. So it wasn't detected in here, but it's probably in maybe it's in some book. It could be, but maybe it appeared 0 times. But this is a word that did pretty well here, actually. Yeah. So this is all a critique. It's a bit of a strange thing. And if you then sort of step back and let me, get this sorted out. So these are Zipf distributions, our friends. The Zipf distributions, this is at the decade scale. And so this is a Zipf distribution for just the words in English fiction for 1810, 1820, 1830, or 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We may start in the 1850s, I'll check. But you see these Zipf distributions look really similar. This is where the allotaxonometry stuff kind of came out of. They look very similar. There's a scaling. This is rank of word, right? So this is going to be the, of, and. Comma, I think, is the number 1 gram. If you take a punctuation. There's a slope and there's this break in scaling. It's very gentle, but this is a -2 scaling, close to -1. That is a real feature of English language. And if you plot the cutoff frequency, if you take the 10th 1 gram, the 100th one, the 1000th one, what is its frequency of usage? It corresponds to this. It doesn't really change, right? It's not as if this is sort of moving around much. This is to say that the Zipf distributions are remarkably consistent. Obviously, there's an enormous jumbling of words in here. And that's where we started to get this lexical turbulence idea. So, to what extent do words here move around from year to year or decade to decade versus words here and words here? And when I say words, I mean 1 grams. So we end up with these scalings. There's the frequency, the frequency of usage is a function of rank, but then we get these flux, this turbulence thing. So this is the flux of words for a given frequency that go up and down as a function of frequency, right? So as we go, this is time, 1820 to 2000. As we go through time, there are words that are becoming more frequent and less frequent. So there's this flux across these boundaries. And how does that flux behave as a function of rank? So it turns out to have scaling as well. So the further you go down, the further you say in rank, right? So rank increasing means lower frequency. Then the flux increases. That's as frequency decreases, the flux goes up, right? So the frequency of usage goes down. So you can measure these exponents, kind of match them up. And that's what this is supposed to look like. This is frequency. These are corresponding things. This is relatively the frequency threshold, and this is how many words are going across that boundary at the decade scale. And this is a bunch of decades to compare. It's a little rough, right? We've just sort of gone to 10 to the minus 7, 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 5, fitting these little slopes. But it fits in with the zip distribution story. And again, so basically, as you go down the zip distribution and you look at its bubbling over time, then it increases. And that's why those allotaxonometry graphs look like this. Anyway, we'll look at that. But you can, play around and look at all these little these very small differences, like which words shifted. This is using JSD. It's an older thing for us. But see, we've seen this before, brackets appearing, just very simple basic function words. So this is at the, this is at the, what is it, rank of 10 maybe? Yeah. Anyway, it would be rank of 100. So I think this is more like rank of 1,000. I should have it written down. Oh no, there it is. So frequency threshold, 10 to the minus 4, 10 to the minus 4, 10 to the minus 5. And it depends on, this is the 70s to 80s. So now we're looking at particular frequency, like what's going up, not the most common stuff, not the rarest stuff, but, maybe breath. These are funny words, right? They're a bit specific. David is there, for example. Like, why is, becomes a more common name, I guess. The ampersand disappears. Various kind of stylized things go away. It gets a little strange, and I want to say, we don't need to look at all of these, Tolstoy went away, but I think I have it in, yeah. So this is 10 to the minus 6, this is 1980s to 1990s. So, this makes sense, like there's a word that's come into usage, but Picard, TNG, Riker, I don't know Star Trek that well, but these are Star Trek characters, right? So this is really appearing in Google Books because novelizations of those stories are massive. Does this mean that this really governed how people thought about culture and, right? No, maybe not.
What about, have you done, time series of frequencies or, synonyms or, near synonyms to see, instead of,
yeah.
word take over?
We haven't done that. I'd be interested to see if someone's done that well. Yeah. There are lots of computer sciencey kind of things where there's stuff. There's other ones like changing in meaning, for example. Like, can you detect that a word is changing in meaning? Gay is sort of a big example that's often used, right? Because you can detect the change in it. And of course, it's the change in the dominant meaning. That's sort of what you could get. Synonyms, no, that'd be good. The real one we've tried I was a student in Parks years ago. It's metaphors, right? Like measuring metaphors. We've done proverbs now, sort of. A bird in the hand, just sort of kind of roughly getting that form and seeing how it appears. Anyway, it's a weird business, but what we do see is that the zip distribution is really solid over time. So that kind of architecture of language over time, but the bubbling, and so this goes away from birth and death. There's a very characteristic kind of bubbling of language. There's lexical turbulence that has a scaling, right? So the top of the zip distribution is really kind of frozen. The comma is always number 1, basically. There's only a little bit of movement in the top 10, some more movement in the top 100, if you like. And then as you go down through rank, it bubbles and bubbles and bubbles more and more. But it doesn't seem like that is changing in a way over time, which is different to the birth-death thing. It seems to be kind of robustly bubbling away as time unfolds. Yeah. The World According to Garp was a popular book. So you see, it's at number 1, which is really weird because it's sort of one book. There's our friend. I mean, this is amazing. Lanny, but again. All right. That's good. Okay. We do have this. Okay, so this book hasn't been published because the OED got, or some academics in the UK were kind of rude about it. We realized we can do it. We had a student inbox scraped the Historical Thesaurus. which is pretty cool. It's 1,000 years, right? Goes back, and you have an evolution of things. Damn it. I'll have to bring, it's something I've been sitting on for a long time. Wrote to him, said, hey, we want to publish this. We just want to check that's okay. And there's just this torrent of stuff came back saying you can't do it. You can't, we don't. And they gave us a year and some sort of weird sin bin thing. And we're like, okay. And then they said, no, you can't do it. But there have been court cases now. And we did this with good intent. We had no idea. Like they had this little kind of usage thing that was not very poorly stated. And we didn't realize that we couldn't, as academics, get this data and play with it. Yeah, they were quite awful about it and very anti-science. And I don't know what they're trying to achieve. Not much has been published on the Historical Thesaurus. But what it has is, the evolution of these words and then the categories they belong to. And the big categories for words are society, life, and the world. They're the sort of big main categories. And so you look at how big those categories are. And then it goes sort of to your point, right? I mean, this is the thesaurus. I guess we kind of have done this. Like it goes deeper into categories and you see which words. So words get more meanings as they go along and so they become associated with more words. So you can kind of see how that's going on. We're able to uncover things like, you know what, God damn it. I'm really mad about this. This is like just a disaster.
You don't need to pay to get it, then you should be allowed to do anything you want. There's a whole case like LinkedIn, they have that happening. The person was like, no, I need to make an account even to get on the stage, and the courts ruled in their favor because they didn't pay for it.
So basically at this point, that's where we are, and because of that, a friend pointed that out to me, and I just have to basically do it. Like, cite that court case and put this on the archive. I mean, look, this was this beautiful, I mean, I have to edit it, but it's like the growth of meaning space span by the English language over 1,000 years. Fantastic. But you see, the core of it was like getting it meaning, time is money, and so on. Fletcher, fantastic kid, great kid, very serious. I had a class here in Parks, and then we would go and spend a long time talking about it. So this is, I'm going to talk about this. Yeah, this is, sort of look, this is, people, of course, have made these categories. The world, the mind, I guess the self, I said the mind, society. And then there are these categories within all of that, and then they, cross over. There's joinings between them. The one that evolves over time is leisure really explodes, right? Because words like, roller skates, like stuff like, which are reflective of people doing leisure activities. It starts more with agricultural kinds of terms, which makes sense. A lot more words to do with the world to start with. There's a number of words. You can see like little kinds of jumps, like 1400 was a little bit of a spike, at least as to when we associate words. Made a whole visualization thing too, which, I have to find and reanimate. This is like how big are these categories, right? So you can sort of see the world is kind of growing here. These are words that are lost, considered to be, archaic. So these are the world, society, and the mind. These ones have been left out, but it's grown. The mind hasn't grown, quite as much, which is interesting. And then these are cross categories, right? So that's what that is. Connections between them. So this is like one way of looking at a network, but it's, there are three categories and then there are three kinds of links. So the world and society, how they're linked together. And then it was these plots, and there's really a nice visualization. This is a ranking of the top categories. So this is going down into subcategories. And you sort of, there's Old English, right? 1200, 1300, these are big pieces, 1500s by century. Action and operation really dominates the whole way through until 900, it starts to slip down, and leisure becomes the dominant word space. We just have more words for messing around. Recreation. This is when we become fully realized otters. And it's got a little tracker thing. Oh, I wish God damn it, this has to be made. the colors here, so you can kind of see which way, space. So that's, going to be physical space that's sort of tracking through pretty well. It's still there, but really falls off the list. Yeah. I think more like, words that, like distance, measurement, physical space, like anything to do with room, like, right, territory. I think that's right. We'd have to dig into it. They have their own visualization thing online, but it's, you see, occupation and work does not exist until here. There's huge changes, right? I mean, this is the Industrial Revolution, I suppose, but plants kind of had a big go here, but seems to be got the food and drink. You got to have the food and drink. Yes, no, it's really an interesting, fantastic piece of work. I know there's some glitches there. Yeah, I'm mad about this. Yeah, and then all these little kind of trackers of time, little time series for pieces. Moral evil, not so much. It gets pretty specific. Motion in a certain direction. We need words for that. Yeah. So essentially I have to tune this paper up. We did have a whole online visualization thing as well, but yeah, it got totally destroyed by people. Really upsetting. Okay, so I think we can do it. I want to show you some things I'm just trying to play around with. Let's see if we can. Let's see what I can do. I'll put on my glasses. So these are Pratchett books, and I've made kind of my terrible little scripts to do things. Let me see. I guess I need to. Can you read this? Is it okay? Yeah, it's just the Watergate report. It's just sitting there. Awesome. Ooh, cost $2.65. Okay, so for example, this is, so we can load in, so this is the truth, right? So we're going to load in the truth, which is book 25. And then this I'm just doing by hand at the moment, just to sort of, get an idea of this. So what this looks like is, this is in MATLAB, you don't have to worry about that at all. This is a little table, and yeah. So this is a question for you guys. Do you think this will work? I mean, so what I did was applied a lens to the book. There are a number of lenses I've applied. One is, this is using the ousiometry words, right? And we have two sets of words there. We have the original ones, and then this augmented one that Michaela Fudelig created by using some other thing to add plurals and conjugations. Something we're a little careful with in general, like, maybe it doesn't work, but it is interesting. So what it did, it was actually a bit smarter than I thought it would be. So B is in the original word list. So when you look at what's in this new word list, which goes from about 20,000 to 32,000, I mean, it really expands. And again, it's just plurals and conjugations of verbs. That's what it should be. I think there are some mistakes. Like I saw a back, taken a back, and a backs was there as well. That's probably okay because you're not going to pick it up in volume in a text anyway. So even if you have some errors, it's okay. The error we're worried about is if a conjugation, for a word gives you a word that's just completely different in meaning, like the way does it make a mess? So to B gets augmented with is and was. they all get put into this list. So it's a little more meaningful than just sort of trying to make ED or some clever ones. So this what's going on in here is okay. So here's the original data, right? So these are the I think originals, right? So I have a whole bunch of them. They were provided by Julia Ale. It was very kind of them. And these are words, I can't share these online. So what I was thinking about is, so here's the basic stuff to start with. Let's keep focusing on the truth, which is 25. So I changed the names around a little bit to kind of make them clean. And if you look at this, okay, so less. Right, so basic first thing to do, I couldn't really write a script to do this well. You look through them all, they're all a bit different. So, I just kind of did that by hand, just in Emacs. I just loaded them all in, that's easy to do, and then cleaned that off. So it starts the clean version, and I just called it hand clean. So it was a little bit of a failure. I felt bad about myself for not being able to make it. So this is the game is you don't want to do everything by hand, and you don't want to do everything by script because, you have to be careful with doing that because you might spend 1,000 years trying to invent AI, like real AI. So it's always a little bit bespoke. Anyway, so that's cleaned off. So then the hand cleaned one would be, it's got the same thing. My practice, so now it just starts with that. And so this may be a little bit too much, but I simply went through, and I do a thing where I space everything out. So this would become quote, space, can, space, we, space, question mark, space, quote, right? So breaks it all apart. So periods get broken off like that as well. And I don't mind it. I sort of think that's okay and I think I handled like ellipses and so on. So there's a spacified version. Let's do that. That's, again, it's some horrible little, so it looks like this. There are no paragraphs or anything. So it's now, so ellipses are handled. So it's now it's all smashed into bits a little bit. I think the punctuation is definitely worth keeping. And then at the same time, I think it's here. I make another one. I know this is, all overkill, but I'm just trying to do this. And I've done this before. I'm just sort of writing things again, I suppose. But so now it's just one word per line, right? So now it's a really clean time series. And now I'm going to apply a filter, and it's going to depend if you're using which lexicon you're using. And it's in here. So now we're so it's this little lens, right? Ousiometer lens, this little thing. You put into it, I know this might be a bit much. So here's just a little shell script that calls it Ousiometer lens. It's a Perl script, I know. But this is the lens. So it's just, that's a big table. It says that's 1 for the number of headlines in that table, so it skips that. And this was a loop. I used TC shell. Does everyone know that TC shell is a thing? There's C shell. There's SH. Okay, SH, right? Shell. C shell, which was a little bit cooler at the time because it's sort of C-like, and then TC shell, which was super. Anyway, it's pretty exotic. Unix people use what? Z shell, right? Yeah, right. Bash was really huge for a long time with Linux. And I'm like, I guess I should use Bash, but that's not what happens anymore, right?
You call Bash explicitly, and then whatever your shell script is, if you have to do it.
If you're forced to use Bash. Why do we hate Bash now?
I don't know if we hate it. It's just like,
it's uncool though.
It's fine. It's not good stuff. I think one of the biggest disadvantages we have in our program here is there's no classes that teach that.
There are none. No. It's so bad. It's unbelievable. Like when I did my PhD, I'm like, oh, so like eventually, in retrospect, I guess almost, I'm like, oh, so I should have taught myself, which I sort of, which I did, because I ended up being a sysadmin for our group. So but it was not. It's never said anywhere. I don't know what to say.
Well, Well, because so my boss, Josh Auerbach, he used to teach a class just about that.
We need it.
Why don't we have that?
No, we need it.
Really? He was like, oh, check this out. And I was like, I never, because instead of having to write a script in some language and making it work for some process, you can just do a full in batch and do all the stuff you need to do.
Well, what you eventually end up realizing is you want to have this kind of this scaffolding, and it has to start with shell. And I mean, I use TC shell, right? But it does really, this is for each file. This is just a little thing. It's universal kind of structure, right? It's the blob at the top. This says, do a glob, list all of those things, and then it's a variable, right? You're looping over. Bash is a bit different. C shell is a bit different, but you use that, and then you use Python, and then you use whatever, right? C. If you have something that's really hardcore and you can't really get it to, Python is taking forever because it's interpreted and well, you probably should use Julia, but C. All my the big stuff that I did in my big stuff that I did at the time, what seemed considerable, all those calculations it was originally Fortran in my master's, but then C and even in MATLAB, I would write C code and then compile it as a MATLAB compand, which would explode the computer when it went wrong, but made for a really nice environment because you had the super, the place where you just had to, you had the field and some grain, right? You were in that kind of world, and then you go out into like magic space. And MATLAB, hopefully Julia is kind of similar to it. I mean, it's matrix laboratory, matrices. It's the stuff, It's pretty good. Okay, so this is just a little shell script. We should talk about it. We want that. I would love to see that. It's terrible. Because, people are learning by stack exchange, which, is okay. But they need to know they should learn by stack exchange, and you should know Z shell and whatever that is, and you should have a Mac because if you're going to not have a Linux machine because it's a Unix machine.
They need PowerShell, which is like the Windows terminal for other machines if you want, which is the funniest thing.
Oh, God damn it. They have such a mess. It's so bad. Let's still it. Yes, all right. Wow. Okay, so this will do them all, and what it will do is, so you give it a place to live, and it's this. So now this will look like, there are two versions here. There's it makes a lowercase one, just a text one, so that this one matches, this first one it's the simple lens, and every word that matches whether it's lowercase or not. It's case agnostic. So let's look at that one. So this is what I want to maybe discuss a little bit. So this is, So for example, in the lens, it's all lowercase. So it matches university, even though that's a case thing, right? And just in this, just to make it a bit easier for myself, I did put the power danger structure scores. Obviously, you don't have to do that. And then this is the number of the 1 gram. So again, punctuation, all those things count. And the reason for doing that is now we can say, take this, filter it, and this is, it turns out this is pretty uniform, right? The subsampling of the lens of 1 grams, it doesn't really concertina too much or whatever. It's like, it's pretty regular. So that's kind of a nice thing to see in itself. You expect these are pretty good words. But now we have a time series, and now we can do, and I just used a simple square filter, just basically run a little averaging filter through it. That's something we want to think about, because you can say to yourself, all right, I want 1,000 words to make a score, and then I want to move that thing by 100. A filter will say, I'd say it's a filter of length 1,000, so I'm just taking an average of everything in a window of length 1,000, and then I'll just move it forward one word, and smooth through the whole thing. So it gives you a smoother time series. Of course, you can just do 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, and then they're all independent of each other. Does that make sense?
to the last part because
Yeah.
are you saying it doesn't matter what you do?
Oh no, it does. Yeah, yeah. No, it does. And we need to think about that. Yeah,
Okay.
because the filter one, obviously they're overlapping,
Great.
and you're using whatever. Something like, so they're sort of the end limits of some sort of filter thing. Let's say it's 1,000. You go block, 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 and you know that the words are independent. So that's the thing I'm loading in. And I guess what I want to say is, like, do you think no, I don't want that one. I want the filter one. So the filter one looks like this. The filter one is harsh. The lowercase one is harsher, right? It misses university, for example, because it's got a capital letter. So it's going to miss words at the start of sentences. It shouldn't change it too much. And my question is, if you look at this, do you think this is something we can share online? Because we've destroyed the book. And yeah, what do you think? Could you say you have stolen a book?
I don't think so. I think you've transformed it.
I mean, pretty bad, right?
It's just like a part of the data set. So like, who's to say that like you can't just like aggregate all this stuff that data set online? This is like now a source of truth that like people should be able to access.
That's right. So we have, because the next thing we could do is like, we could make a time series making choices about how to do it and hand that to someone. The words are lost. So we've taken away some freedom just from that, but also we need the words for the word shifts.
Unless like the original creator could have like made money off of like this, then like.
Because Terry Pratchett's estate is actually kind of Sue happy.
Yeah.
So.
Which is unbelievably ironic because he clearly hated, was it Mr. Slant?
Yes.
Is the main lawyer?
The zombie lawyer.
Yeah, who is very much a lawyer kind of character, but is also a zombie who has been around for a long time. Oh, well, I guess he's not part of it. What is it? The Fresh Start Club, Red Shoe.
Yeah, he's just their lawyer, I think.
But Red Shoe, who's in the police in the watch, he helps run the Fresh Start Club, which is so. This okay. He's a zombie, right? He decided at some point to work in a coffin factory because he would then sneak in a little thing on the under lid. So if you wake up, it's got some like where to go. It's like, and it's kind of like a flyer for the Fresh Start Club. And I can't remember what else was on it. We could Google it, but it's just trying. And then there's a whole thing about people who are against the undead, particularly zombies. Vitalism is I mean, it's good. It's good. He addresses all that stuff. The campaign for equal heights. That's the dwarves are not happy about how they're treated. All of this is done in a very compassionate, wonderful way, and it's there's an uplift to it. That's why it's he's not mocking these things. He's giving them some nice space. Well, there's always a little bit. So that's exciting to me, right? Because then we can put these books up, and especially if you do the lowercase, right? So if we took Harry Potter, it would wipe out everything. There were no names. If you do the augmented one, so the augmented one, as I said, so this would be the augmented one with. See, it's not immediately different. What you start to see are things like were, for example, right? So that's a conjugation of be, so that's in there. But were is going to appear very uniformly throughout the text of the function words. So the function words are always things you can basically just take out because they will only add like a base level. And you can just, you can look for this, right? So we could say, right, we want were, and then I think it's a space I put in, no. Did I put in a tab? What am I doing wrong there? Were. Oh, it's not at the, okay, it's not at the front. Yeah, sorry, wrong thing. So I could do this. This will capture all the words. Yeah, right. Of course, they all have the same score. But you can see, like, and then you can just mess around with it. WC, right? 321 words. Yeah, it's not too bad. And if we wanted, we could plot their narrative time thing against just their index and see that it's pretty uniform. So we shouldn't be too worried about that. Last thing maybe to do here would be, we'll just have a look at. I think I can do it like this. If I get a C in there. Okay, so I was just trying to find, right? So there are two directories. There's this one plus an augmented one, and then all the versions of Discworld with a 25 in it. So it captures them. So this one, if we just match disregarding case, disregardless, then we have, it's about a 10% decrease if we worry about case, right? So only low. So that's, that's not bad. The augmented one gets 12,000 more, maybe 25% more. It drops a bit once we do lowercase. What we're kind of hoping is none of the time series that come out of this should be too different. But, we now have an opportunity to look at that.
If you were to get the differential of this, would it just look at the index, the difference of the index of appearance of certain words? Would that be your diff?
Yeah, say it again if you want.
If you were to get a rate of change for that word, would you just look at the
yeah,
just be the index, right?
Yeah.
Indexes.
Yep. And even just so let me do I have another little one here? Let me plot it here because I think this is kind of so this is the narrative index of all the words that were matched in this filter for all of them, not just word but everything. And so it's just plotted against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If there was some weirdness, you'd see it, right? So this is basically the filter is this lens is picking up every whatever it is, fourth or fifth word, and it's doing it very uniformly through the book. That's basically a straight line. It's a very simple thing to have done, but we could do a little diff and so on. So this, let me clean that off. So I've loaded the truth one. This is the basic one where it's matching independent of case. So I'll get the scores out. Okay. And then this is going to the filter thing. I'm just doing this by hand. This is very messy. Obviously I put this into a script, but this is just some playtime stuff. N is 1,000. I'm going to use a simple filter. This is a MATLAB thing built in. This is a ones n by one. So that's a 1,000. It's one repeated 1,000 times. So it's a little column vector. Then I'm going to say the scores of the things I'm going to filter down that way. What's that middle n for? That's it doesn't matter too much right now. I don't need to show you, I guess. So that does a filter, and then I've just called it Y, which is not very smart. So this would be, I've actually kind of filtered the narrative time as well, just to kind of put in the right space. And we need to start at some point because we don't want the filter to kind of just start, 1, 2, 3. We want it to clean off that first part. So this would be, so for example, this is power for this one. This is danger. Let me do that. Power. Okay. So you can see that they're going against each other, and that starts to suggest that there's a different axis here. And in this one, it is kind of that happiness or the safe power axis. And I'll try and show you that. You can see that really strong. This is not true of all the books. And let me show you this plot here. This little loop here is all of these points plotted on the power danger framework. So 0 is here, right? So ousiograms would be these big pieces that go out like this. This is 0 and 0 this way. So this is safe down here, right? Dangerous up here. There's a safety bias of language, so we expect words to be, or the averages to be in here. That's fair enough. It's quite symmetric. So this is the truth. The truth runs around in this little space here. And you see it does have an angle. So if you subtract off the mean of the thing and then do SVD on it, it's definitely got this kind of splotch. Other books, and you can't really see them, have more of a kind of a square shape to them. So this, it's kind of an interesting thing. They're all situated, you know, because language does this, they're all situated down in this, you know, this is the, that's the dangerous safe line. They're down here, they're balanced in terms of power and weakness. Again, what we've seen for those corpora. And then the question is, you know, we're averaging lots of words. If we averaged everything, then we just have a point, right? So that one, the fact that we've chosen 1,000, you know, governs how big this will be. If we choose, you know, 10, it's going to be a bigger mess. But really, they're supposed to just sort of, as this winds along, it wanders around in that little space. And there are some nice ways to. So I'm just sort of trying to think, because then you've kind of got a little. Let me maybe do this plot. Yeah, so this would be power and danger, right? It's kind of a nice little thing. So we could do this. So this is something where I'm just going to plot the first 100 points of the time series. You can kind of see how it I mean, I'm really just following these time series back here, right? Just like, you know, where are they in 2D space? I mean, this is moving down towards a, you know, kind of a more positive, right? This is more dangerous and weak up here. Keeps exploring that, and then it starts to go back to kind of a dangerous, weak place. It's a little centered. So it's sort of exploring, you know, relatively. Things get bad again. It really, you know, it wanders around. It's interesting. This is a terrible way to read a book, but it's sort of the feeling space or the meaning space of it. Huh. Interesting. This is just madness, right? I don't know what's going on, right? But I mean, it has a little, you see it finally got to a little further down here. I plotted a couple on top of each other. I don't know, let me load one more. Well, it has sort of a little, so here's the last one, at least in this series that I have. Oh no. This is a problem with MATLAB. I don't know what's going on. Like I can't break this. Oh, this is dumb. Okay, I'm going to hold this down. Sorry. I didn't put a semicolon. You should see that. You should see the misery, the stupidity of what I'm doing. It's just stupid. I'm working in a terminal. I shouldn't be doing this. Go on. So you're saying like you make a little.
Like it'd be weird to see it's like weird to see a time series show up like over itself. I guess. So like it'd be cool like maybe like animation and like the more there's like a different feeling, the more like intense like the color of that area gets or something.
Yes. There's also, I mean, you could color it by time, which.
Or like say you like some chunk of your time series and then we'll like redo the heat map based on that like chunk. And I say heat map loosely, it's just like your
this little thing, right? Yeah. I mean, so the plot could be something like, I can't believe I did this. Come on, it's got to be close.
I kind of want to see it in the style of like an attractor from Chaos.
I mean, that's sort of what, when I do that, I'm kind of. I can't believe I just did that. Yeah, so that's, you know, it is making this excursion. So I'm loading a different one. I'm going to make a different space for it, and then maybe 1,000 would be. So this is 1,000 data points at a time. This is for a different book. It doesn't quite have the same, right? It doesn't. So that's an interesting excursion, that one there. It doesn't have the same, quite the same architecture, and it has this. So this is going out to dangerous, powerful. You know. And again, that's sitting. This sits. You can see it. That's that yellow blob there, or whatever the color this is. They're all located on average in a very similar region, but they kind of have a different thing. So in dynamical systems, this is the chaos thing. In dynamical systems in general, and this isn't what this is exactly, but there's some, you've got something that's evolving over time, and you're interested in the attractor, right? What you call the invariant density, right? So as this unfolds, you can imagine having this little just PDF fill in, and if it's reasonably consistent, if you have something that visits things in a reliable way, then this density becomes fills in, and it can be weird. The strange attractor ones are fractal shapes and strange things, but even interesting ones, maybe if something visits every point, for example, in this little space, it will end up as a uniform distribution. Doesn't mean it's a boring thing. It can just have a simple invariant density, meaning it visits every part of the space uniformly, but it can be pretty weird how it does it. But there's real structure in here. You could add. So, question is is it too confusing? Probably. So this one, for example, this is power minus danger. Oh, so I've got a new plot now. That would be, that's power, that's danger, and then this is adding them together. This is power minus danger, which will make the top thing. So, okay, so this is the danger one, right? So you can see danger goes up here. There's a little bit again. Power's wandering around. If you subtract this from this one, you get the top one, and that would be happiness, right? That's the happiness curve. You can see these are, so you can do correlations of the time series now. We're in this different space, like how similar are they? We know for the language and for the corpus in general, there's this real structure, but when you get to a time series, it might not act in that way. And we saw that for the truth, that first one I showed you. There's a real sort of bias to the words tracking, or the time series tracking around in a space like this, which is the happy, sad dimension. The next one, one piece, and we've played around with this over the years, I did it for Moby Dick back in 2014, 15, is to have kind of little automated word shifts for peaks. And there could be just these little overlays that, you automatically identify. And of course we have like Andy's, the online thing for books, which is super powerful. But, it would be really nice to have this thing pop up and say, okay, peak, 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 here's a big peak, here's a big peak. What are the time series? We've had these things where we've tried to find, I'm not happy with anything we've done with these, right? But what are this is like socio-technical time series. What are these shapes, right? Then it's not Fourier, it's not wavelets. We had this idea of, particularly for, actual events in the world, and we have a paper on it called chocolates, right? So it's the little essential building blocks for the time series are things that go like this and then fade away, which we see over and over again in real time series, the way people pay attention to things. Yes, you can build everything out of Fourier or wavelets or whatever, but that just doesn't, it's just the wrong object, right? It's clearly like shocks happen and then some decay. That's a very social phenomenon. That's a little less obvious in this, and then you have problems with smoothing, right? If you actually have really a shock in a time series and you smooth it, you start to kind of wipe it out, which is not right. Shocks you can have maybe maybe in books, yes, I guess, but certainly in movies you can really have we should just watch Severance for the rest of this.
Honestly, like, I remember like fourth and fifth grade, they're like, oh, this is the shape of the story. And then it's like, no, this is the shape of the story.
Yeah. Did you really?
Well, it was like
With Vonnegut? You saw the Vonnegut stuff?
No, not like basic stuff where it's like,
Oh, like conflict, like rising tension, and then wow, people still hang on to that. It's amazing. Like the Wikipedia entry for the plot is basically, I think this is basically all we know. Not how it works, like I don't understand it. And it's very archaic language, like, rising tension, sort of climax, and then falling tension for apparently half the story. No one wants to spend, I don't know, maybe. But there's some real action in this one. And then the question is, what do you do with an ensemble of them and blah, 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 blah. But, yeah. But, yeah, like how do we start to put a bigger figure together there's a whole, like a little tableau of, these things scrunched up into little boxes. This is book 1 through book, 41. So we kind of want that one. So you sort of have the big picture of it. But then I think, each book basically could get on the web is what we would do, right? You'd have this big kind of, which we do have it. But there's also a nice PDF version where here's sort of a report, like here's an analysis of the whole thing. People, there are services online where you can get your novel analyzed and pay lots of money for someone to tell you if it's good or bad.
You can like stratify this stuff for like, say, like maybe like the Magic Treehouse books, or like maybe like all like the Hunger Games style books that came out when that was like a whole fad. I wonder like how similar.
Yes, and yeah, hugely human behavior, right? Because they're all trying to copy the thing that succeeded because they don't know what will succeed. Yeah. How good are they at emulating some of the Hunger Games was a ripoff of like a Japanese. Well, I did rip that out in Pucks, right? That's a claim. There's that one. There's the sevens, but we don't know. And the way to figure it out will be through character. And I think is through automatically somehow getting out character interactions, allied to this kind of stuff as well, because this is the big shape of the story. Then you have the architecture of this temporal network, right? How do we? So Romeo and Juliet has some arc, right? But there's the mechanics of which characters are connected with, and who kills who, whatever. And if you have another like West Side Story, you want to be able to see that it's the same architecture, and you can only do that by somehow distilling the temporal evolution of it. All right, very much time to go. No, of course, you're right. You should 100% go because it is time to go. Anyway, that's sort of playing around with things. I'm thinking about what figures we could produce and how to tell the story.